3 Ukrainian drones pierced Russian airspace when everything suddenly went dark. No GPS signal, no satellite communication, just black screens and an invisible enemy. These drones, identified as UJ-26 Beaver, were engineered for harsh electronic warfare environments, but now faced an unprecedented challenge. Remote pilots at a Ukrainian base, hundreds of miles away, relied solely on infrared cameras and inertial navigation to press on with the mission. What unfolded next defied all expectations, as the drones breached Russia's advanced defense systems.
6 drones infiltrated Russian territory on a mission to hunt a high-value target, a 38-car military train. Its cargo, enough firepower to level a large city block, included 220 tons of 152mm artillery shells, 50 Grad 122mm rockets, and 15,850 gallons of diesel fuel per car, posing a severe threat to regional security. Protected by a dense air defense network, this train was a critical logistics lifeline for Russian forces in the southern region. Before diving into today's main story, comment 1 if you support Ukraine, 2 if you support Russia, or 3 if you're neutral. Now, let's get back to the video's main focus. These drones weren't expected to survive long in such a hostile environment. Russian electronic warfare units swiftly intervened, jamming navigation systems, seizing control signals, and disabling sensors. The Russian electronic warfare system, the Repellent 1, emitted jamming signals across a frequency range of 400 MHz to 6 GHz with a 10 kilowatt output, capable of disrupting any drone's communications within an 18.6-mile radius. These weren't simple civilian drones that could be easily neutralized when signals were lost.
The UJ-26 Beaver drones carried an unexpected tactic that caught Russia off guard. Each drone was armed with a 44-pound KZ-6 shaped charge warhead, able to penetrate 11.8 inches of steel, and featured a frequency-hopping control system switching 2,000 times per second. Their first objective in reaching the train was to disable the enemy's air defense eyes, a strategic 330 kV transformer powering 6 air defense systems in the area. Failure to destroy this target would leave them vulnerable to Russian defenses. Success would blind the air defenses for about 20 minutes, opening a window for follow-on strikes. Standing between them and the target was one of Russia's most advanced defense systems.
The Repellent 1, a cutting-edge electronic warfare weapon, was deployed to hijack the drones mid-flight. Russian operators monitored screens as the system broadcast fake signals, commanding the Ukrainian drones to land or return to base. They waited patiently for the hijacking to take effect, but their efforts failed. The drones' control signals hopped frequencies thousands of times per second, like switching radio channels at an untrackable pace. By the time Russia locked on to one frequency, the signal had already shifted to another.
This wasn't groundbreaking technology. Frequency hopping, invented during World War II, made the difference between a drone controlled by the enemy and one ignoring hostile commands. Each UJ-26 Beaver was equipped with an advanced digital signal processor, DSP, enabling autonomous frequency switches without base communication, rendering Russian jamming ineffective. Meanwhile, half the drone formation vanished from Russian radar control. The southern drone group split from the main formation, navigating along the Seversky Donets River Valley, extending their journey by 24.9 miles, but staying below enemy radar detection. Ukrainian intelligence had mapped every radar position along the border, identifying invisible corridors where terrain and physics created blind spots just wide enough for a drone to slip through. These corridors were calculated using Earth's curvature and terrain features, with a maximum altitude of 82 feet to evade the P-18 spoon rest radar, which has a 155 miles scan range. Flying through these corridors was like threading a needle at 112 miles per hour, requiring absolute precision. A 0.6-mile deviation to the left would expose them to the S-300 system, with a 186-mile detection range and the ability to track 100 targets simultaneously. A 0.6-mile shift to the right would put them in the sights of the mobile Tor M2, with a phased array radar, 7.5-mile range, and capability to hit targets at 33 feet. Remote pilots had to maintain precise altitude. Exceeding 148 feet would make their signals visible on every radar from the area to Moscow. Splitting the formation began yielding tactical dividends. Russian radars detected heat signatures from the northern group near the M4 highway, prompting the deployment of Panzer systems for interception. The Panzer S-1, armed with 12 57E6 missiles with a 12.4-mile range and twin 30mm cannons firing 5,000 rounds per minute, posed a formidable threat to low-flying targets. They didn't know 3 other drones were quietly navigating the river valley, using basic physics to conceal their movements. At 82 feet, Russian radar visibility was limited to a 12.4-mile horizon. Earth itself became a natural shield for the southern drone group. These drones used an inertial navigation system, INS, with a 0.1% error rate over 62 miles, paired with digitized terrain maps to maintain their course without GPS. In the Russian command center, officers faced a nightmare scenario. Focusing mobile forces north would expose the southern flank. Dispersing defenses risked both drone groups breaking through. They had seconds to decide. The final approach to the Arlovsky area required a different tactic, as the drones faced a dense air defense network with at least 3 overlapping layers. The transformer sat on elevated terrain with clear visibility, making it a deadly trap where any aircraft would be exposed within a 0.6-mile radius. Ukrainian planners identified a potential weakness, a mobile tower 2,625 feet southwest of the transformer, possibly creating an electromagnetic shadow. If exploited, this blind spot could open the path to Salsk and the ammunition train. But the intelligence was 2 weeks old. A single repositioned Russian mobile radar, like the 96L6E of the S-300 with low-altitude detection, could turn the approach into an ambush. Lead pilots gripped their controls tightly as they neared the supposed blind spot. There was no way to confirm its existence until they were fully committed. Breaking cover in the final 1,312 feet meant Russian Zu-23 crews with a 2,000 round per minute firing rate and 1.6-mile effective range had less than 8 seconds to react. But 8 seconds is an eternity when twin 23mm cannons with a 3,182 feet per second muzzle velocity are aimed at you. One drone had to lead, betting its survival on outdated intelligence. They needed at least 3 drones to survive, 1 for the transformer, 2 for the next mission at Salsk. The Northern Drone Group reached the Arlovsky power station at 2:26 a.m. They had traversed 55 miles of Russian airspace using a radar gate weaving technique, exploiting gaps in radar coverage created by hills and terrain. Pilots pre-planned flights through these blind spots, like threading a needle between detection zones. The drones were programmed to adjust altitude based on terrain data with 1.6-foot precision,
ensuring they crested hills for just 2.8 seconds, enough to navigate, but too brief for enemy computers to classify them as valid targets before diving back into cover, playing hide-and-seek with radars en route to the target. 2 Zu-23 air defense positions were hastily deployed to protect this critical infrastructure. Their crews were now fully alert and hunting targets. The Zu-23, a Soviet-era anti-aircraft gun, remained lethal with twin 23mm automatic cannons, a 2,000 round per minute rate, and a 1.6-mile effective range. Against jets flying at 500 knots, they were nearly useless. But for drones moving at 112 miles per hour, with a 10.5-foot body and 14.8-foot wingspan, they were deadly if gunners could track them. The system's weakness was its obsolescence. No radar guidance, forcing gunners to aim manually through 2x magnification optical sights with a 15-degree field of view, akin to shooting clay pigeons in a storm with a sniper rifle. Through the lead drone's thermal camera, the pilot clearly saw the target, a massive 330 kV transformer, the size of a small building. This device powered the regional grid, feeding 6 air defense sites, including a southern Panzer battery. Destroying it would collapse the air defense network like a house of cards. Precision was critical. The 3 Beaver drones formed a classic pincer formation at 1.2 miles out. The lead drone climbed to 984 feet, deliberately exposing itself to draw fire. Both Zu-23 positions swung toward it, their tracer rounds forming a deadly curtain of fire. That was the plan. While gunners focused on the high target, the other 2 drones hugged the ground, approaching from opposite directions. The second drone suddenly climbed at 328 feet from the fence, too close for the Zu-23 cannons to lower their aim in time. Gunners shouted in frustration as they tried to adjust, but the drone cleared the fence and dove behind a maintenance building. The lead drone executed a barrel roll amid tracer fire, its pilot applying techniques learned from studying Russian gun camera footage. Zu-23 tracers followed a predictable pattern, with gunners firing ahead of the target. By abruptly rolling mid-maneuver, the drone caused gunners to miscalculate and miss. The third drone capitalized on the chaos, approaching from the east between 2 33-foot-apart high-voltage lines, forcing defenders to halt fire to avoid damaging critical infrastructure. A single touch of a power line would vaporize the drone in a plasma arc. Clearing the power towers, all 3 drones converged on the transformer from different angles. The first strike came from the low-flying drone, hitting the transformer's base and shattering its cooling system. The 44-pound KZ-6 warhead detonated on impact, its molten copper jet piercing steel like paper. The transformer's cooling oil met the molten metal and vaporized, triggering a fuel-air explosion that launched a 197-foot fireball into the sky. 2 seconds later, the high-flying drone Dove, its warhead piercing the transformer's top. The third completed the assault, striking the control cabinet that could have contained the damage. 3 strikes, 3 angles, no escape. The real destruction came moments later. With 330,000 volts unleashed, the surrounding air became conductive. Giant sparks arced between exposed components, each carrying the power of thousands of lightning bolts. Circuit breakers tried to cut the flow, but the damage cascaded. Protective relays, designed to disconnect in 0.02 seconds, couldn't handle currents exceeding 10,000 amps, triggering a domino effect that shut down 6 regional substations. Relays detected the fault and disconnected substations in sequence, plunging half the region into darkness. Within a 31-mile radius, every air defense system reliant on the regional grid, including P-18 radars, Pantsir batteries, and command posts, went offline. Backup diesel generators, rated at 500 kilowatts, needed at least 90 seconds to start and couldn't provide stable power for complex radar systems. At regional military bases, emergency generators began spinning up, but diesel engines needed warm-up time and electronics required steady power. For the next 20 minutes, radar screens flickered, computers rebooted, and air defenses were severely degraded. Meanwhile, the 3 Ukrainian drones sped toward the target train. At 2:33 a.m., the Pantsir S-1 crew at Salsk railway station watched their world collapse. The Arlovsky substation shockwave surged through the grid like an electronic tsunami, disabling early warning radars, command centers, and targeting data links. The Pantsir itself had power, its truck engine running steadily, but it was designed as a network node. Without support systems, the crew could only detect threats within their own radar's range, reduced to 9.3 miles by electromagnetic interference, leaving seconds instead of minutes to react. 3 miles south, the UJ-26 drone group approached through a storm. The southern group had traveled 155 miles using infrastructure masking, following rail lines where steel tracks and overhead wires created radar clutter. The drones maintained a precise 400-foot altitude, calculated based on the 2-degree scan angle of the P-18 spoon rest radar to stay below its primary search beam. Russian air defense doctrine assumed low-flying targets along railways were maintenance vehicles or inspection drones. By holding exactly 400 feet, just under the P-18 radar's main beam at Salsk, they remained invisible until the final approach. The attack timing was no accident. Ukrainian intelligence knew the Pantsir crew changed shifts at 2:30 a.m., with a 10-minute handover when both crews were in the command vehicle. During this window, the Pantsir's combat efficiency dropped 30% due to distraction and coordination lapses. The drones arrived precisely in this window, when response times were slowest and chaos peaked. They flew in a dispersed formation, each pilot monitoring teammates via infrared cameras while tracking degraded navigation systems. Without GPS, they relied on fleeting terrain features in the rain, a bridge over the Donets River, a 15-degree rail curve, to confirm they were on course to the rail junction. Something was wrong. The lead pilot noticed it first. Railway lights, expected to be off, were completely dark. Either the power outage had spread further than anticipated, or the Russians had activated a defensive plan, shutting off all lighting to hinder the drone's infrared cameras. Or it was a trap. The Pantsir gunner squinted at a noisy thermal screen, trying to distinguish real targets from false signals in the rain. The system's manual tracking allowed the turret to rotate at 30 degrees per second, just enough to engage a target moving laterally at 112 miles per hour. Without precise radar data, he had to estimate range and angle manually using a 4x magnification optical sight, like a World War II anti-aircraft gunner wielding modern missiles but limited by degraded sensors. A faint heat signature caught his eye, something moving through trees. Too steady for a bird, too warm for ground clutter. He swung the turret right, wrestling with low-power hydraulics. The crosshair wavered as he struggled to stabilize the shot. The fire control computer, with a 1 GHz processor, took 3 seconds to generate a firing solution using degraded optics. He pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The battery voltage had dropped below the minimum needed for the launch sequence. Switching to emergency mode, he bypassed safety locks to prevent misfires.
On the second try, a 57E6 missile roared from the tube, its exhaust flash briefly blinding the thermal camera. Launching the missile was only half the battle. The Pantsir's missiles used command guidance, receiving in-flight trajectory updates via radio data link. Without radar tracking both missile and target, the crew had to guide it manually through rain-obscured optics, like throwing a dart at a bullseye while riding a roller coaster in a storm. The missile's radio link flickered and failed after 1,312 feet, another casualty of the power shortage. Unguided, the 57E6 followed its last commanded trajectory, passing harmlessly by the drone. As the Pantsir missile lost control, the three drones scattered like fish evading a predator. The lead drone barrel-rolled left and dove, minimizing its profile. The second veered right and climbed, forcing any gunner to choose between targets. The third held course, betting the crew would focus on the maneuvering drones. This dispersal and deception tactic exploited a fundamental limitation of manual tracking. Humans can only focus on one target at a time. The Pantsir gunner instinctively tracked the climbing drone, the most visually distinct target. By the time he realized his mistake, the lead drone had slipped behind a warehouse. A $15 million air defense system became an expensive fireworks display. The crew commander shouted orders to prepare another shot, but the battery voltage had dropped to critical levels. The backup power system, designed for short interruptions, wasn't meant for sustained combat. The drones regrouped 1,640 feet from the station, approaching from 3 compass directions. They synchronized their final attack using internal clocks, emitting no radio signals to betray their coordination. Each would hit the target within 2 seconds of the others, overwhelming any remaining defenses. The defenders could see the drones approaching on degraded screens, but were powerless to stop them. At 2:40 a.m., a Russian infantry unit near Salsk station spotted the drones through night vision goggles and attempted to shoot them down with AK-12 rifles. But at 112 miles per hour, with a small profile, the effort was nearly futile. With defenders firing blindly and their most sophisticated weapons rendered useless by the power outage, nothing stood between the drones and their primary target. At 2:41 a.m., the 3 surviving UJ-26 Beaver drones converged on Salsk railway station from different angles, their thermal cameras capturing a scene beyond the wildest expectations of Ukrainian planners. Stretched across multiple tracks was a 38-car military train, its cargo a shopping list for destruction. 220 tons of 152mm artillery shells with a 15.5-mile range, 50 Grad 122mm rockets with a 12.4-mile range, and 15,850 gallons of diesel fuel per car, waiting for a spark. The 3 drones executed their attack with surgical precision. They approached in a staggered formation, each at a different altitude: 164 feet, 328 feet, and 492 feet, forcing defenders to constantly adjust their aim, slowing response times. The lead drone's infrared sensor painted the scene in stark hot-cold contrast. The locomotive's boiler glowed white-hot. Behind it, thermal differences revealed the train's deadly cargo. Fuel cars showed uniform heat signatures from 15,850 gallons of diesel each. Ammunition cars were cooler, with reinforced steel walls and ventilation designed to prevent exactly what was about to happen. The first drone dove toward the locomotive. The train's engineer, hearing air raid sirens, desperately tried to move the train. But the 3,000-horsepower locomotive, with a top speed of 50 miles per hour, couldn't accelerate like a car. He could only watch through the cab window as the drones closed in at 164 feet per second. The attack was timed for maximum destruction.
The first, UJ-26, struck the locomotive's diesel engine, its shaped charge warhead easily piercing civilian-grade steel. The molten copper jet tore through the engine block, rupturing fuel lines and hydraulics. The 38 cars of ammunition were now stranded on the tracks. 6 seconds later, the second drone hit its target, fuel car number 3, chosen because it was upwind of the ammunition cars. The shaped charge warhead sliced through the steel as designed, but diesel doesn't explode like gasoline in Hollywood movies. Instead, 15,850 gallons of fuel spilled from the ruptured tank, flowing under the train like a river of fire. The diesel met the hot metal from the destroyed locomotive and ignited, creating a rapidly spreading fire pool.
The third drone targeted an ammunition car near the train's center, selected to spread secondary explosions in both directions. Each pilot monitored teammates' impacts via thermal cameras, adjusting aim in real time. The third pilot knew exactly where to strike. Ukrainian intelligence had identified the car with the most sensitive cargo. The KZ-6 warhead pierced the reinforced walls, detonating amid pallets of 152mm artillery shells. The initial explosion was relatively small, contained by the car's armored structure, but it triggered an unstoppable chain reaction. As the third drone dove, the burning fuel had reached the ammunition cars. Its warhead struck a heated car, ensuring the chain reaction would engulf the entire train. The initial blast reached 3,632 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to detonate the Grad rockets and 152mm shells, triggering secondary explosions that spread through 20 cars in 15 seconds. 3 drones, 3 precise strikes, an unstoppable chain reaction.
Russia's defense ministry later claimed it shot down 22 Ukrainian drones that night, but live-streamed videos from dozens of smartphones told the real story. The governor's claim of 2 damaged fuel tanks and 1 locomotive was almost laughable against images of a smoke column stretching miles, visible from space. The Salsk explosion created a 656-foot fireball, with a shockwave extending 1.9 miles, destroying buildings within 1,600 feet and crippling the regional grid for another 12 hours. Comment 1 if you support Ukraine, 2 if you support Russia, or 3 if you're neutral.